Tens of millions of Americans are facing eviction, and there hasn't been enough help from either the federal government, the executive branch, or from congressional lawmakers. And so as many as 40 million Americans are at risk of losing their homes because of the fact that this pandemic has led to a dire economic situation for a lot of Americans. Many aren't able to pay their rent. And so we're seeing reports now, actually a really great report that was done by CNN that profiles people who've already been impacted by this. Take a look.
Deputy Gant, an officer for 35 years, is just starting his day. 8 evictions are on his list.
A co-defendant is here, 2 of them.
At each stop, people behind on rent are ordered to leave. Possessions pulled out.
Where are you guys gonna go now?
We gotta go to a hotel.
You can go to a hotel.
As Deputy Gant works through his list, we get word that 200 eviction orders have come through the Harris County courts for this week. That's double what they normally saw for an entire month before COVID.
So, people are getting kicked out. That was in Houston specifically, and hundreds of people were set to be evicted. Now, Trump has claimed that there's been a solution to this. It's not quite a solution. I'll get to the details of that in just a second, but I do want to go to one more video showing what people are dealing with in places like Houston.
Hello, Constable, need to come to the door.
From one Houston home to the next.
Hello, Constable.
Deputy Bennie Gant with the Harris County Constable's office executes judge's orders to evict.
Hello, Constable.
We ain't got nowhere to go.
Israel Rodriguez is the tenant at this apartment, but he's not alone. 20-month-old Israel, his brother, 4-year-old Fabian, and their mother are some of the estimated 40 million Americans facing eviction in the downward spiral of the COVID economy.
They didn't rush us, but they were like, get everything you need.
Rodriguez admits he hasn't been paying rent, behind thousands of dollars.
It's my fault in the eviction. It was a lot going on during the corona. When it hit, I lost my job. So it took me like a month to get another job. This is my check, but I ain't making it with $300. It's literally $300.
Their stroller now carries their possessions.
It's mainly the kids' clothes because me and her just wear the same clothes almost every day. Make sure we got, toilet paper and a little bit of snacks for the kids.
What are you gonna do with all of your stuff?
That's trash. They can throw it in the trash because we don't have a car, we don't have help, we don't have nobody that can come, help us out right now. Nobody. We got ourselves, me and the kids and her, that's it.
So that is something that was expected. The lack of action in Congress and the political games that congressional lawmakers are playing have real life consequences for people, including children who end up on the streets in a country where we have an abundance of housing, an abundance of resources. And what I don't get is, what do the landlords think is gonna happen after they evict people, right? Like, do they think that they're gonna get new renters right away? I mean, people are unable to pay their rent for a reason. The economic situation for the vast majority of Americans right now is not a good one. And so it makes no sense to me to just do these mass evictions. And Cenk, jump in before I talk a little bit about what the Trump administration under the CDC is proposing or doing as a so-called solution.
So the reason why these didn't explode earlier in coronavirus is because of the CARES Act, and there's a couple of provisions in there. One about eviction, another, of course, was the $600 a week that people got for unemployment. Now, over 20 million people are still unemployed in this country because of coronavirus, and the Republicans say absurd things like, "Hey, we got to cut the unemployment checks and make sure they get less money, otherwise they won't go back to work," as if there is work to go back to. No one left their job voluntarily; they were all laid off. So those provisions in those bills were good. And I've talked about how the PPP was positive. We've talked about how they gave too much money to the largest corporations in the world. So, a fair analysis of what was good in that bill. But now that money's run out. And so at the end of July, they basically said, you're on your own. well, this is what on your own looks like. And so that number that was in that report is 40 million Americans could be evicted soon. That's stunning. So this was just pent up waiting to happen because of all the people who are unemployed now. To Anna's point, yeah, look, I mean, if you haven't seen it, in some places, the wealthy are leaving big cities like New York City and going to the suburbs, thereby increasing housing prices. But that's only because they have a ton of money. They used to live in Manhattan, which is nearly impossible to afford, right? But for the rest of us, almost all Americans, especially people in dire straits that lost their jobs, most are renters. So, or they're hanging on by a thread. There aren't a whole new wave of renters to come and take those places. So guys, there's a lot of reckonings coming. And so the first wave will be hit the poor, as you're seeing here with your own eyes. But then there are several other waves that are coming, including, by the way, for real estate interests, and then eventually for the banks. Because if there's nobody left to pay rent, then people who own real estate are gonna be in a world of trouble. And we've pumped up the stock market to keep it artificially inflated to try to make it past the election. That's what Trump has done. Now the market crashed again today, so I don't know how long that crash will go. But no matter how you look at it, for all of us, there's a reckoning coming. It's just that the poor are the leading indicator of that reckoning.
And Trump is no different from politicians who like to provide the aesthetics of providing solutions, right? But in reality, if you look at the details of what he's offering up as a solution to prevent evictions, it just doesn't go nearly far enough in keeping people in their homes. It's actually a very burdensome process. So the Trump administration just recently announced that the CDC will invoke its authority to halt evictions through the end of the year in an effort to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. First of all, we know that Trump doesn't care about the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, but he certainly does want to win as many brownie points as possible for the upcoming election. Then you get into the details. First off, this is not rent forgiveness. So even if you qualify under this Trump plan to remain in your home and not have to deal with eviction, you would have to pay what you owe your landlord in the beginning of next year. Also, the CDC's order applies to people who would have to be eligible for the stimulus check sent directly to millions of Americans earlier this year, individuals with $99,000 or less in income, or couples filing jointly with $198,000 or less. Now, okay, so that's, I think, fine, but then you get into what an individual would have to do, right, to apply and qualify so they don't get evicted. Those who are eligible must meet additional criteria before presenting their landlords with a declaration, which will be made available on the CDC website. So they have to fill out forms. They have to show that they have made efforts to seek government help and cannot pay their rent due to the impact of the pandemic, and they must demonstrate that they are likely to become homeless or move into congregate housing if evicted. Okay, so how do they do that though, right? And also, what happens to people in January when they literally owe thousands of dollars in back rent to their landlords? There's no solution to that either. So it's just something to keep in mind as you all hear about how Trump is supposedly doing his best to help people out. It's just more political theater meant to help him with the upcoming election. I wish that he did more. I don't care about politics in this case. Like, if he were doing enough to keep people in their homes and actually had a good, robust solution, I'd give him all the credit in the world. This ain't it.
Yeah, and last thing on this, it's funny, they try to squeeze in things that they're going to do for regular folks before the election, so you're tricked into voting for them. Right after the election, they cut it off immediately. And before the election, they don't do this, they promise to do this, which is things like cutting the capital gains taxes. Now, that only helps the rich. So that's them saying to the donors, keep giving me money, because that's the one thing I actually will do, because I owe you, right? And the donors are what get me elected. So I'm gonna deliver tax cuts for the rich after the election. Whatever the rest of us are gonna get are gonna be squeezed into the couple of months before the election. And then as soon as someone's elected, they're gone. They don't care about you at all. By the way, that's true for 90% of politicians, Republicans and Democrats. But for Trump, as usual, he takes that phenomenon and puts it on steroids.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.